Hi friends, my name is Cindy and I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library's Children's Room. Today I'm going to read to you from two different books about frogs, and one frog in particular called the hip pocket frog. And it says that the male hip pocket frog is tiny, no bigger than a human thumbnail. That's really tiny. Look at that. That's how big my thumbnail is. Then the other book we'll be reading is Being Frog, which is a little more poetic. So we'll start with Hip Pocket Papa. And that is by Sandra Markle, and it's illustrated by Alan Marks. A male hip pocket frog ducks beneath a button-sized mushroom cap. It's a tiny space, but since he is no bigger than a thumbnail, he fits with room to spare. Settling there, he croaks in a creaky voice. And there he is, right there. Nearby, a female hip pocket frog hears her mate and crawls away to find a meal. For the past 8 nights and days, the pair has guarded this bit of forest floor together. Now, the male focuses his golden eyes on one small spot on the leaf litter. There, beneath a covering of orange and brown leaves, is a glob of glistening jelly, studded with a dozen pearl-like eggs. The tiny parent's developing brood. Here are the eggs. And there's Mama Frog. It's December in a very dry summer for Australia's temperate rainforest. As the sky goes from dark to dim, a warm wind blows away the early morning mist and turns the squishy leaf litter's surface crisp. But beneath the leaf blanket, the glob of jelly and eggs stays wet, the way the eggs need to be for oxygen to slip through the rubbery shells to the developing tadpoles inside. Suddenly, a centipede, not much longer than a grain of rice, arrives on many legs. Waving its antennae as it searches for food, if it crawls down into the leaf litter, it's likely to find and eat the frog's eggs. Snap! The male hip pocket frog's long tongue flicks out, snags the centipede, and pulls it into his mouth. He defends his brood by swallowing this enemy that's even tinier than he is. Look at that. Three more days go by as the male and female hip pocket frogs take turns hunting, guarding, and waiting. There are those beautiful eggs. Finally, the eggs hatch. The jelly surrounding them turns to liquid, a birth puddle for the 12 teeny tiny tadpoles swimming up and out onto the surface of the forest floor. Her job done, the female crawls away, but the male stays. He has an even bigger job to do. He croaks and wades into his wriggling brood, sits down and stays still. Hour after hour, he waits while the tadpoles wiggle up his hind legs and into the hidden pockets on his hips. Look at that. Each tadpole will get all the energy it needs to grow from the yolk ball in its tummy, but the young father needs to keep eating. So, finding nothing on the forest floor, he burrows into the leaf litter until he finds tiny crickets and then eats his fill. The male stays buried for 2 nights and a day. That keeps him safe from hunters overhead, a young brown snake, a skink, a wolf spider, and a boobook owl flying low. Once the hip pocket male could have stayed for weeks and caught all the prey he could eat, but now little food remains. The drought, 3 years long, has taken its toll, so the young father must return to the forest floor to find a meal. You see the spider and the owl and the skink. I think that's a skink, and the brown snake. Oh, and I just saw the little frog right there. You might have already seen him. He hunts in the morning and late in the afternoon when the forest floor is damp and the fewest hunters that might eat him are on the prowl. He spends the rest of the time hidden in shadowy nooks and spaces. He needs to stay safe and keep his skin wet. Like fish, the tadpoles inside his pockets have gills and need to be wet to breathe. Some days he dines on insect eggs the size of tiny seeds. Other days he snaps up little prey, mites, midgets, springtails, and woodlice. They're all his different prey. Once he comes across a staghorn fern and, crawling inside its crown of leaves, finds a tiny pool of water. Then, clinging to a hidden place among the leaves, he waits. And when a swarm of midges, attracted by the water, buzzes around him, he gulps down all he can catch. Look at that. There he is, and there are all the midges. One late afternoon, a dusky antechinus surprises him, running fast across the forest floor with its jaws wide open. But a quoll, watching from a rock, pounces on this hunter and, catching its own meal, rescues the frog. Wow, I've never even heard of those kind of animals, have you? Another time, a black and white currawong, searching with big yellow eyes, spies the male hip pocket frog and plunges from its perch. Although he rarely hops, the young father leaps in the nick of time to dive under a log and escape this hunter. For nearly 30 days, the young father hunts for food and watches for other hunters. Safe and moist in the pouches on his hips, the 12 teeny tiny tadpoles grow bigger. When the tadpoles squirm, his hips appear to shimmy. Look at that. By January, the forest is usually rainy, but this year it's drier than ever. Warm winds shaking high branches create showers of dry leaves instead of water. Over and through this crunchy litter, the male hip pocket frog crawls. At last he finds what he's been searching for, a creek bank where the ground is still squishy wet and the leaf litter is teeming with tiny prey. It's the perfect new home, and he's arrived just in time. Inside his hip pockets, the tadpoles are changing into froglets. Look at them, the little tiny frogs. Bumps become legs, fish-like tails shrink to stubs, big eyes develop, and big mouths with long tongues. The yolk in their tummies is nearly gone, and the froglets are almost ready to find food for themselves. Finally, their gills become lungs. One by one, each tiny froglet pops out of the male's hip pockets and gulps its first breath. Their father stays still, watching over his brood one last time. While he waits, the 12 tiny froglets hop off and crawl away. The tadpoles that grew up inside his pockets are ready to be on their own. Look at those beautiful little babies. And now we will read the other book called Being Frog. And that's by April Pulley Sayre, and it has some beautiful pictures of frogs on the back. And these are photographs, very nice ones. Being Frog. A frog is a being. It is watching. It is seeing. A frog has favorites. This rock, this log. Its daily job, support the frog. A frog must hunt. It scans, it spies, it crawls, it lunges. It fails, retries. It cools in shade beneath a flower. It hides underwater. Bath or shower? It kicks and surfaces. Its eyeballs gaze. Does it remember its tadpole days? First egg, then tadpole. 2 legs, 4. A tiny froglet crawled ashore. Now it suns, it caves, spelunks. A green frog calls with glunk, glunk, glunk. It climbs a cliff, mossy, steep. It sits so still, then suddenly leap. Does it ponder? We don't yet know. Does frog time fly or trail, snail slow? Waiting, watching, scanning, seeing. A frog has a life. A frog is a being. And that is the end of Being Frog and Hip Pocket Papa. I had so much fun reading to you guys today, and I hope you learned a little bit about frogs. Once again, my name is Cindy, and I work at the Children's Library at Portland Public Library. I hope to see you again soon. Thanks, friends.